Good afternoon, everybody. We're so excited to host this conversation, this pivotal discussion today, speaking truth to power. We're so excited to be in the presence of none other than Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. We want to welcome you to the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York. And we're so excited about this opportunity to engage in conversation and dialogue with you today.
Well, first of all, Pastor Green, let me just say thank you. Being here with so many talented, let me first say thank you to you, Pastor Green, for hosting our very first, as you can see behind us, Speaking Truth to Power. And it is my honor to be here at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York. So I want everyone to know who's watching, we are right here in New York. And this is an opportunity for us to speak to America. And we're going to speak to America from the voices, from the consciousness of Black Americans. And so we don't have a written script today. So I'm going to say to each of you, if we're going to have a dialogue, let's keep it real. Let's speak truth to power. When we think about your generation, Pastor, your generation, and my generation, let's talk about when we think about this great America that we live in. But let's also talk about the effect of the policies, the things we do in the United States Congress where I serve. How does it affect you, your community? And Pastor, what can your community, religious leaders like yourself, and members of Congress like myself, what should we be doing to speak truth to power, whether it's the economy or healthcare or education or a woman's right to reproductive rights? What is it we should think about? Climate justice, civil rights. Think of the leaders of your time and think about what affects you and your community, our communities. Okay, so, Pastor.
Amen. We're excited. And this is just such a pivotal moment for this discussion to take place when we're talking about speaking truth to power and what our nation is reeling with right now and how our society is grappling with so much change. And so we have gathered some of the best and brightest minds of our community and voices who are on the ground and who are working and building a beloved community and really speaking truth to power in their own areas. And so we just want to go around to allow them to introduce themselves so we know and so the nation will know who is a part of this pivotal conversation. Let's start with you, Dr. Garner.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Donald Garner, and I have the privilege of serving as the minister to the young adults and the college students here at the Greater Allen AME community or Cathedral. And in addition to that, I am an urban faith leader. I am a professor at the university here at Fordham University, and also an entrepreneur. So wear a lot of hats and have a lot of lenses in which I'm looking at the world right now.
Greetings. My name is Reverend Anisha Jacko. I am part of the ministerial team here. I am also an urban school leader of an elementary school in our community. I also chair education as part of our Jack and Jill of Queens, in addition to a part of the education with our Delta Sigma Theta sorority in Queens as well. Also, just so many of our OSG, off-school grounds community, where we lead and connect with school leaders all across the world. And I'm so proud and happy to join this conversation today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon. I'm from Queens, New York. I graduated from SUNY Westbury with a degree in criminology. And I also now have transitioned into the arts with modeling and acting. So it's a pleasure for me to be here and to be able to share my thoughts with everyone.
Good afternoon. My name is Naja Lord, and I am a born and raised New Yorker, born in this church, basically. I graduated from Babson College last year, and I am a current 2L at St. John's University School of Law, and I am excited to be a part of this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joseph Dennis, or you guys can call me Joey. I recently graduated last year from Mercy University, or formerly Mercy College, in a degree of psychology. I recently opened up an Instagram page called mentalclarity.co, where I'm helping people with mental health, self-care tips, whatever, and I'm very honored to be here today, so thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Pastor, Congresswoman. My name is Corinne Elmore. I as well grew up in Queens, New York, in the Greater Allen Cathedral of New York, and I am a rising junior at Harvard College, where I am studying government. And yes, I'm so excited to be here and be a part of this discussion.
Hello, everyone. My name is Neota Walton. I'm currently, oh my God, sorry. My name is Neota Walton, and I am a recent graduate of Clark Atlanta University, and I majored in biology. I am planning to pursue a nursing degree so I can, work more in the medical field, because that's where I think that's where God is putting me to be, in the medical field. So yes, I'm really excited to be here with you all today, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ty Hankerson. I currently serve as the Chief of Staff for Speaker Adrian Adams, and recently got elected as District Leader in Southeast Queens.
Wow, what an impressive group, Pastor, we have here. Well, I'd like to kick it off by taking you back in time. So most of you, probably maybe not any of you, were born in 1963, 64, 65, a time of civil rights, a time of voting rights, a time that allowed us to really learn how to express ourselves. So if we fast forward today, and we're still fighting in your time for voting rights, I think it's always important to ask young folks and younger folks what voting means to them, what voting rights. When you talk about education, when you talk about having a ministry, working in government and healthcare, having your own business, all of this means that you're providing a service. And I truly believe that God has a plan for all of us. But God also wants to make sure that we plan for ourselves and others. And I believe before we start talking truth to power about the issues, let's talk about what you think the value and the importance of today being able to vote. So we're going to ask a couple of you to address that, and that will lead Pastor and I into another question, and we'll work our way all the way up to a lot of the issues today at this most pivotal time in our country.
I guess I'll start.
Okay.
Wearing my voting shirt, so.
Oh, there you go.
I truly feel that voting is not just a right, but it's a power. And the moment that someone says, I'm not going to vote, or chooses not to vote, you relinquish your power. And so for me, as a 29-year-old, I've been voting since I was 18. And ever since, I've realized, listen, I have to keep on, I have to maintain this, and not just for me, but also for others around me, encouraging others to vote as well, and realizing that importance.
Voting is our power. That's powerful.
I would also add that voting gives me voice. And when I'm able to participate in different forums where you get to meet and greet, it's nice to know that there's someone sitting in that seat who I, one, know their platform, and two, I know they speak for me if I am not in that seat. So it's knowing that I have a seat at the table through proxy, and knowing that someone that I know that I had an opportunity to support is out fighting for the things that I need, which also connects to the ability to be able to read and write. And I think a lot of us think of level 3 readers. To vote, there's a certain level of literacy that you need. And so it also encourages me to make sure that I'm leading in a way that my students will be able to exercise their right and participate in government.
I
Wow.
want to, if I could,
Yes.
Congresswoman, add, for me, voting is an intergenerational connection. When I think about you all, when I learned about what voting was, it was from my elders. And so I was raised in the South, and most often, Southern people really respect their elders, right? They are the matriarchs, the patriarchs, and we hold them to the highest regard. And so when I think about my elders and the presence of the church, it's how I learned to buy into the power, the importance, significance, et cetera, of voting. So when I do cast my vote, I do feel like I hear my grandma and my uncles and my elders and every single person that I've loved who have made me who I am today proud, committing to that very action. So that's what I think about intergenerational when voting is happening for me.
Okay, you're giving us a lot to dissect. So, power, voice, leading, intergenerational. So now when you think of those words, I'm going to ask someone younger to now put that in the perspective of what's the most important thing to you. Because we're all going to go out and tell people to vote because that's our power, our voice. It connects us. It allows us to lead. So when you think of that, what's important to you at this point in time in this country, in this church, in this community as a Black American, a young Black American?
I think what's most important for me, I've lived in this neighborhood for all my life, really. I'm 32 years old. It would more so be for us to focus on violence that's been happening. I'm a pretty active guy, so I like to go to the gym. And even going there, a lot of the gyms that I go to now there's certain aspects that have been shut down because of gun violence. And just to be able to know I can't go to a gym without the possibility of a crime happening, for me that's pretty concerning. Just because as Black Americans, we don't have a lot of access to healthy foods around the neighborhood. So for me, I need to make sure that on my end, I can take care of myself in a way that I don't have to worry about these problems later on in life because of generational aspects or, hereditary issues within my family itself.
Okay, somebody else.
I think that something that I've been learning about is healthcare, for sure. I went to a mental health conference not too long ago, probably like at Adelphi, and they said that we are still fighting for our healthcare. And everybody else is accessible to all their health cares, but here we are as Black Americans, we're still suffering. So I believe that if we have our voices be heard about having health care that's affordable for us, then maybe we can be able to have the health care and the helps that we need, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically. So I definitely think that health care is super important within our community.
Okay.
Yeah,
Next.
and as a young person who I'm turning 20 this year, I'm voting in my first presidential election this November.
Yes. Say that again.
Voting in my first presidential election this November. And as a college student, I think in speaking with my peers and speaking with people my age, something that keeps coming to mind is political efficacy. So not just voting, not just knowing that you can go to the polls and vote, that's important, but also feeling that when you cast your vote, that you're able to move and shake your community, that your vote has a purpose, that it matters. And when I think about that, I think about civic education. I think about feeling as a young person growing up in a church where my voice was persistently told that it mattered, having parents that took me every time they voted in our community at every election. I think instilling our community with that sense of efficacy and that sense that we can be change makers is just as important as the policies that we hold so dear to our hearts. So yeah, that's what I add to young person.
Okay. Go ahead. We're going to let everyone say an answer to that. I want to know, look, we're speaking truth to power here. So whatever comes to your mind and is in your heart, because that's really part of the purpose of doing this, hearing what's important to you, and there's no right or wrong. It's whatever comes to you that's important to you.
Okay, so I want to piggyback off of what was already stated a little bit. So yes, we mentioned healthcare, and yes, we mentioned your part, but also I want to talk about how you added the education of things not being taught. Also, because now I'm currently working at the Allen Christian School, and I'm noticing, that certain things aren't being taught to the kids or being taught in schools anymore. So how are we gonna push our young generation to, oh, yes, voting is important. Yes, but when you get the ability to register to vote, yes, you should go and do it. It's not being advocated or taught enough in schools, I feel. And that's why it's not, being transferred enough to the younger generation from us. So that's why I'm piggybacking off what she said. Education is important in this, and especially in teaching our younger ones who are going to be here when we're not here, that voting is important, that the voice should be heard.
Okay. Right. Anybody?
I was going to say something very similar, but I truly believe that knowledge is power. And after my first year of law school, I learned so many things that I feel like I should have already known. I shouldn't have just learned it just because I'm in law school. And I think that's a big issue of that what we're facing right now is a lot of people just don't know what's going on. They just don't have the knowledge. It's not like what was just said, it's not being taught. And for whatever reason that needs to change. There are very, very, very basic things that you learn in your first year of law school that I should have known in high school. And I think that is a big part of the problem.
Also, to add on to the education part, I think I read somewhere that in Florida they were trying to reverse people learning about civil rights, and I think that's super important for our kids to know, because if you're reversing learning about civil rights, that means that everybody else are thinking that they are free in America when it's not. We did have to fight to have the right to vote. We did have to fight to be free, and I think that it's disappointing that we're living in a country that they're trying to reverse everything that we've learned and fought for. So I think that having to fight for our education to learn about the true history of America is super, super duper important, for sure.
Thank you.
I'm adding to my colleagues the the theme that I feel is reverberating is the significance of education. And we all know this, that I've been taught that education is the proverbial equalizer. I love that phrase. And it is what connects each and every one of us, sitting down. So for me, this statement that I'm getting ready to make is a statement that has been in my heart for a very, very long time. I just didn't have the courage for years to say it. As a person, I have been working specifically with the education of Black and brown males in K-12 students under 18 for almost 20 years. And I have studied it. I have been in community centers working directly with young men of color who are specifically, cut off at the knees on every level, academically, socially. And it has gotten me to the place at 41 years of age where I wonder, also for our Black girls too, are public schools the places to really house and educate our Black and brown kids? And it is still a wondering. We know that public schools has historically educated Black and brown people. But every time I immerse myself in what is happening on a regular basis, schools are not, with deliberate speed, educating our Black and brown kids. We know that they have to come in with a particular capital that if they don't have, they cannot compete. So in summary, I am, again, really concerned about how our Black and brown kids are showing up at the age of 17 and 18, being expected to navigate society if the public school system is the very mechanism that is preparing them to do so, I'm very concerned.
Okay, Pastor, now, they're giving us a lot to digest. They're giving us the issues. And let me just say this to you. Every issue that you just mentioned is an issue in my generation that we're discussing in our district. Gun violence comes up repeatedly. Far too many of our Black children die of a gunshot wound than anything else. When we talk about healthcare, and especially mental health, there is a connect when we talk about legislation and making sure that we do more preventive treatment care for mental health. And you're right also on the whole healthcare. If we're gonna speak truth to power, then the sisters over here then tied it to process. You know, you gotta vote with a purpose. It's not about just saying I went and got a card to register to vote, but I don't know what I'm doing. You have to have a purpose, and yes, you have to be educated on it. And then you brought it full circle with where we ought to be. And we shouldn't have to get all the way to law school to learn something. And we have to figure out that it may take more of a village for our children. See, when I was coming up, there was village. You want to talk truth to power. Miss Maddie on the corner, Auntie Bessie, who wasn't related to me, and Miss Jones over here could take care of you, and you hope they didn't tell your parents when they got home because it started all over again. Now, Pastor, let's bring it back to us. They have said to us what they believe the priorities are for voting with a purpose, making sure that we are training and educating. So now if we're gonna talk truth to power, how can the church? Everybody comes from the church, including me, grew up in the church. Grandfather, a Baptist minister. So now let's talk about what can the church, the religious community, and our government, political, congressional family do, and especially the Congressional Black Caucus that came or was birthed out of voting rights and civil rights. So let's pass it to you, Pastor.
This is a very invigorating conversation. I think that as the Congressional Black Caucus is the conscience of the Congress, the church is the conscience of the community.
There you go.
The church is the nerve center of what keeps the community anchored. And I think that, one, this is an example of how the church continues and can continue to be engaged on the front line of hosting conversations and dialogues. One thing about in this sort of polarized society we're living in, where there's the East Coast and West Coast, there's partisan division. The church is a community where people can come and sit next to each other and you don't know their background. You have a doctor sitting next to a transit worker. You have a teacher sitting next to a police officer. You have someone who is unhoused sitting next to someone who is a CEO. And the church represents this sort of beloved community space that we don't often see in our sort of civic society. And so the church must remain committed to that being that convening space, to being that nucleus of support, of providing support. Even so, with the recent Hurricane Beryl, our church on Sunday will be raising resources to support those who have been victimized by the sort of natural disaster. And the church provides, its arms and opens its door. We're blessed here at the Great Allen Cathedral with the legacy of community engagement, from housing development to education, to Allen Christian School, to the Women's Resource Center, and that this church has been a beacon of light for 190 years. This is not something that is an overnight success, but this is something that we've been committed to doing here in the Jamaica Queens community in Southeast Queens. And I think that the church is so important also because of this generational conversation that you have young people who just graduated from Clark Atlanta University, as well as us, those who have just retired from active ministry, serving together and loving God's people together. And I think that is what will help us to reimagine this village concept. This will help us to really position our community forward so we're not just polarized by partisan politics or by whether or not we like someone's personality, but we're grounded in the principles and the policies and the vision for America that we wish to bring. And I'll close here because one thing about the church and one thing about faith, perhaps, and what's missing from our civic society is this sort of civic discipleship that gives us a chance to dream again. America is built off an idea. It's built off of hope. It's built off of a concept of faith that unites people. And what's needed is this renaissance of a spirituality that would help to unite our nation in such a dark and dismal time that we find ourselves navigating through.
So we're going to go to another issue, but let's try to connect this. Because if you're speaking truth to power, you brought up the Congressional Black Caucus. So if you think of 12 men and one bad sister, Shirley Chisholm, the founders, Congressman Charlie Rangel, right here from New York, named it. So if we go from 1971 to 2024, Congressional Black Caucus gave us Martin Luther King's Day. It gave us Juneteenth Day. It gave us health care bills. It gave us internet for our young children through the $1.3 trillion infrastructure bill that a black woman negotiated with members of the Congressional Black Caucus to get it to the House floor. Now, come on, we speaking truth to power. That black lady was Congresswoman Joyce Beatty.
That's right.
So if we're going to speak truth to power, putting our communities together, then we have to figure out how to do what you just said. So we need to have an intergenerational day. We need to say, let's bring our young folks like you together with our pastors. So you're going to have a role. If we're going to kick this off here, we're going to come back with some resolve. We're going to fill this church up and say a day of connectivity. And we're going to bring your peers, your pastors, and members of the Congressional Black Caucus and others together to form something. We can do it here. We can do it in Washington, D.C. But if we're going to go on the road, Pastor, and we're going to bring young folks like you together, and we're going to talk about it, then let's frame it and build it of us being that community, being that beacon of hope. So let's fast forward and talk about the economy, your future. We have people who are graduating, people who've graduated, people who are in the work, entrepreneurs, several different businesses, teaching our children, civic service, law school. So let's talk about the economics, because that's what we don't talk about enough. We don't tell our young folks how to be prepared when there's a global pandemic. We don't prepare you when you don't get through that interview. We don't prepare you for when the bills come and grandmother and mom or dad or older sibling not there to pay it. And then you become one step from homeless. You're out there, mental health, stress comes in. When I say economy or economic freedom, what does that mean to you?
That means, to me, as a mom of two boys, one is 11 and 13, having enough to make sure that they have the opportunities to dream.
Okay.
And so that means meeting their needs from school perspective, from a spiritual perspective, but also giving them the opportunity to travel around the world and to find their passion. And so as a mom, I'm not poor enough and I'm not rich enough. And so you're always trying to see, do I have enough to pay for the soccer program? Do I have enough to pay for the language program or the enrichment outside of schools? In our community, you have a latchkey students, and a number of our schools are not Title I, which means if there's not enough money in the budget for programming, you have students that are walking home to an empty home because mom has to work. and it takes 2 hours to get from Manhattan to Queens. It's a transportation desert.
So you're going right where I want us to go. So let's make it a little more difficult for the pastor and I. We got a system that fails black kids often. Because if you're not wealthy enough, as you said, and you're not poor, that's when we get the gap. People can fall through the gap. So what should government, politicians, elected officials, let's bring it home, the Congressional Black Caucus, pastors, what should we be doing, in your opinion? Because we want to take this back. I don't want it to be easy. I don't want you to hold back the system. We are the system. So what should the system be doing? Or has the system failed you or your peer group in any way? I mean, let's do a rapid fast of yes or no. Do you think the system has failed someone you know? Yes. Okay. So now let's talk about truth to power. What is it that we're not doing? We're going to do it in reverse. Talk to us as young black adults. Where is the system failing? We've already said, you know somebody the system has failed. What is it that we should be doing? If we're really going to talk truth to power, is it legislation? Is it prayer and hope? Is it money? Is it training? What is it?
I think also, Congresswoman, we got to start with the truth. As we talk about truth to power, that this country's economic system has been built off of the labor of black bodies.
There you go.
Exploited black bodies. This plantation capitalism is what Jim Lawson calls it. And so if we talk about economic equity, right, it has to be grounded with a reparative economy.
There you go. Equity.
Equity.
Not equality. Equity.
Equity.
But Pastor, there's research that shows if students left school by first grade reading on level, you would have over $2 billion brought back into your community. And so if you understand that literacy is connected to mental health, poverty, and overwhelming adult engagement in community, you cannot shy away from the importance of literacy when you talk about economy. Because when you have schools that fail our students, they become adults who are traumatized that need to earn a way of living. And when you don't have that, you have no other choice but to go another route.
So are you saying the system and people who don't look like us are failing us oftentimes, and because we know there is still systemic racism, that we live in a time and a place that's very much like the place my grandparents, my parents, and I grew up still exists today? Let's bring it out here. Let's bring the elephant out. Do you believe that there is still racial discrimination? Do you believe that many students don't have what they need, whether it's funding, whether it's the education, because we're not always afforded the same opportunities?
Well, I mean, to start with that, there's definitely still racial discrimination. I mean, we see that there's jail cells that are filled with mostly black and brown Americans, but yet we have a candidate who has these same issues, and he's able to not only run and be the president, but then, felons can't vote. So there's definitely inequality in that aspect, just that we don't have the same opportunities as maybe a, Caucasian, and I kind of want to just bring that towards what I think we need to do in the church is we need to start preaching back to the root. We have older.
Okay, Pastor, he's giving you a sermon now.
I'm
Come on, let's speak truth to power.
Because the church is made up mostly of, I want to say, the older generation. We do have young people who are here who may have grown up as myself. I started here from birth. A lot of the times we may be afraid to preach about certain things because we don't know what the outcome or how people may feel about it. But at this point, we're in damage control. We have to try and fix things, and sometimes we do have a lot of stubborn older people in the congregation who they hear things, but they don't want to change because that's just what they've known for all their time. But I think if it comes from the pastor, that might make them change a little bit and say, okay, well, if he's saying it, although we are around the same age, hopefully they'll be receptive of it.
I think that not only is there like systemic racism, I feel like our voices are not being heard. I feel like we try to like advocate for so much, such like for FAFSA, we were supposed to get like the student aid. We never got that. They're still fighting for that. And I feel like we need to still be able to like have our voices heard and be taken seriously, because I feel like sometimes we're not taken seriously a lot, especially like when it comes to like my job. Like I'm a direct support professional at a residency not too far from here. And we have to fight to like get higher paying, because recently last year we went from $16 to $18. And it's still not enough, because people still have bills to pay, people still have to pay for school, and it's hard on us because we're not being taken seriously. So I feel like if they take us seriously, then that's when we can, that's when something can be done. But sometimes I feel like we're not taken seriously. I feel like it's a lot of, we're gonna do it, and then nothing happens, no action has been done. So I feel like we need to be taken seriously, so we know for ourselves that, okay, they're making an effort to change everything, so let's keep on fighting for this one next, for healthcare next, let's fight for education next. So I feel like if we are taken seriously, then that's when we'll have more confidence. And I feel like younger people will probably have more confidence when it comes to voting, because I feel like with our president, he has promised so many things and nothing has been done. So I think if we're promised a lot of things, then that's when action can be done.
Well, I think that's a good point, but I'm going to go back to your point about being educated and finding things out. I think we have to do a better job, because you mentioned several things that has actually happened. People have been able to get rebates on their tuition. Things have been happening that $16 million went into HBCUs, Pell Grants. Young folks, your age group, because of our health care plan, able to stay on their parents' insurance plan. More young folks have health care now over the last 2 administrations. So I think we also have to do a better job of getting accurate information out, so we don't go out and say, and nothing has been done. Now, maybe it hasn't been enough, or maybe we didn't channel it to every area, but far more has been done. And if we're going to talk about Black Americans, it's important to know that the justice system, and thank you for being in that and going to law school, because we now have a Black woman on the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And why is that important? Because at that level, they make the determination about so many things. But if we don't vote and vote for judges to get them in the system, you can't work yourself up to the top of the system. And so I think you have good points, but it's also saying to me and to you, Pastor, whether it's from the pulpit or from the House floor, we have to do a better job of educating individuals what we're getting, what we're not getting, and what's on the ballot.
So the question earlier was about, what do we feel or what comes up for us when we hear the word economy? And for me, the word is anxious.
Okay. Go a little deeper with that.
I was just gathering my thoughts. So right now, there is a growing body of research from scholars, practitioners who are in the post-secondary space, who are showing us that our college degrees that we're getting do not have the same worth that they once had 20 and 30 years ago. We're seeing more students, more than ever before, with even nursing degrees, with business degrees, who are out of field, who cannot find gainful employment. It's one thing to have employment, but gainful employment that can sustain yourself, that can sustain your families. So another preeminent question that is looming among young Americans today, at least under the age of 25, is why should I even go to college in the first place? That, to me, brothers and sisters, is a concerning question for Black people to answer. I think it's okay still for white middle-aged students to say that they don't have to go to college. I still don't feel comfortable for black kids, for black young adults to say they should not go to college. Even though I understand
That everybody
can't go, everybody's not going to
college.
go, but we're still, to me, not at a place in our economy where we support individuals who do not have a college degree. We are still.
Well, let me say I want to debate you on that. Let's not make this easy for you. So I have a plumber that comes to my house that makes more than the school teacher that lives next door to me. I have an electrician. I have someone who's doing coding and developing gaming tools as an entrepreneur without a college education. So I would say the system has failed us in giving us alternative opportunities. But I want to be very clear. Now, all of my siblings have college degrees. My children are well educated, lawyers. My granddaughter is already telling me where she's going to college. But I also know that there are black men and black women out there who are not going to go to college. And I don't want them to be discouraged. And I want to be very clear that I believe we have to do a better job with workforce development and education that gives everybody an equal opportunity.
I agree. I agree with that. And even in the work that I'm currently embarking upon is expanding the conversation to young people about life after high school. So yes, in our schools, we are seeing, at least in the ones that I work with, more conversations early at 8th grade, 9th grade about workforce development opportunities. I'll say lastly, just in a perfect world, I would love to see legislation or just it being set up in the DNA of one's schooling experience for a black child to know that he or she must get a college degree and work with his or her hands. I would love to see, Corinne be one of the world's greatest attorneys and also know how to sew and be able to just to know that if the economy goes left, that she still has something that she can do with her hands. So in the foreseeable future, I think we could get even more bold and creative with how we talk to our young people at earlier stages about having both to be able to play in this ever-evolving skill economy that we're constantly going to be in.
So let's give them a voting registration card when they graduate, when they come to church and join the church. Let's give them information about workforce development. Let's give them information about two-year colleges, about grant programs, about Pell programs. So in other words, we need to develop our toolkit and put it in the community and in the church to start with our young folks. And we have all of those tools that certainly, Pastor, all your pastors know it, all my members of Congress know it. So we need a toolkit that we develop to put in churches and to put in our communities that we serve as elected officials.
Congresswoman, go ahead, my sister, yes.
I was just going to say, I think that goes back to your point earlier about village and community. I don't think necessarily just information is enough. You need people to pour into you, and you need people to pour this information into you as well. Having the information there is obviously useful, and that's what we want, but you could easily just not use it, not read it, not retain it the way that you're supposed to. But back to the village, having people to really, really make sure that you understand the importance and that you are taking the information correctly and then going and making the right decisions with that information is so important.
So we have to promote it. We have to be that village, whether it's me having an internship program where now they have the information, and I call this old school. We used to pick up the telephone and say, where is Joyce today? And then someone called your parents, and someone might even have driven to your house, or there they were and put their eyes on you. So I do hear you. We have an obligation to get the information, but then to make sure that we embrace the young folks and bring them into our world.
Amen. Congresswoman, I know we are almost at the end of our time together, and this series is called Speaking Truth to Power.
Yes.
And one thing that many of us here probably have been a part of is in 2020, we were outside
Yes.
protesting in the racial justice movement with Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery. And then we mobilized our bodies to the polls, and we talked about the George Floyd
Yes.
bill. How do we get across the finish line? As someone who's a member of Congress, we marched, we protested, we've written letters. How do we get to the power? How do we shift the power? What does it take to really move the people who are the decision makers? And you're one of 435 members of Congress.
We have to stop giving up. You just said it. You know, George Floyd, we marched, Black Lives Matter, we were made promises, and then we stopped. Then another young person or not gets killed. Then we go out and we look for criminal justice, police justice, and then we stop. That's new school. Old school is when you think about John Lewis. John Lewis was younger than most of you here, if not all of you, when he partnered with Martin Luther King Jr., who was more in his 20s, so the age of several of you. But it took them multiple days and times before they crossed that Edmund Pettus Bridge. See, they got there the first time, and then something happened. They turned around, but they didn't go away. They reconvened. And then they went back again, and they got a little further. But this time, as you know, they were met with dogs and hoses, and they weren't prepared for that. And then we know what happened on that bloody Sunday. They made a decision because now they had a collective community. They went back, they had more pastors. They had just what someone said earlier. You said about the church. They had the person that's unhoused. They had the doctor. They had the lawyer. They had the politician and the governor and the city council folks. And Fannie Lou Hamer said, we're going to go through this time. And they did. So I think we have to take what you were saying, more than just the paper and the information. We have to figure out right now what the 1, 2, or 3 primary issues are for young folks. So first we got to identify them. See, we were clear before because it was civil rights and voting rights. It was clear because we believed if we received or got our civil rights and then our voting rights, we could make a difference. And in part, that's why we're all sitting here today. So now we have to take today and say, we still have not reauthorized the John R. Lewis voting rights. A lot of young folks don't even know that, Pastor. So what am I saying we could do? We need help. We need young folks to partner with us. We need the religious community, the labor community, the business community, because it's like, now I got my place, I got my job, my education, we forget. So I think we have to take young folks today because you are more than our future. You gave us what we started before. We've been raising our fists and talking about Black power and Black lives 40, 50, 60 years ago. But you brought it back in a bigger visual, painted it on the streets across America. Black Lives Matter, and you marched. So you did old school, but then we stopped. And the groups get smaller. So we have to figure out and understand by what this small group just said, Pastor, we're not there. They know that we still have systemic racism. They know that there are people still fighting against us with education. We're still anxious when we talk about the economy. We worked hard, we're teachers, we're educated, we have a family, but we're still not rich enough. We're not poor enough, but we're still anxious. We're still trying to figure out how we buy that extra. So I think when we're talking truth to power, we just gave us our great beginning. It's not going to happen overnight, but I can tell you today, you've given me something to take back to the Congressional Black Caucus, to the Congress, to my district to say, we now have a place to start. Pastor, you get the last word.
Oh, thank you so much, Congresswoman Beatty, for this rich discussion. I want to thank all of our discussion partners, our panelists, and those who represent the best and brightest, not just the GAC community, but the larger New York City community and really the world. And I want to just thank the entire team who helped pull this together. And I believe that this is just the beginning and the spark of what will continue. We know what we're up against this year as it relates to a presidential election. And so we're going to do all we can to mobilize our communities, to mobilize our constituents, to mobilize our church, so that we are on the front line of helping to build the beloved community and the world we look to see and live in beyond. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is our Truth to Power. Martin Luther King said, "It is not where you stand in times of comfort and convenience." That's where we're standing today. But it's the actions you take during times of controversy and challenges. Right now, we're in the most critical, pivotal, consequential time of our life. So let's go vote. Let's make a difference. Let's stand up for truth to power and justice. And you heard it right here at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York. I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and I approve this message.